a good improvement. So he has now said that 100 districts will be identified, districts that have potential, but they are lacking in performance and they have difficulties in accessing credit, they have low productivity, etc. So those districts will be selected and given importance. So this is a very important initiative as far as the agricultural credit, as far as the agricultural sector is concerned. Then we all know that Prime Minister introduced this Kisan credit card, and this year loans for them would be increased from 3 lakhs to 5 lakhs. We can see this particular aspect. Prime Minister is giving more credit facilities to the MSME sector, to the segments that needed funds. This we can see throughout the budget. So similarly, another important initiative in this agriculture and rural development is uh, keeping this India Posts Department, Indian Posts, Postal Department as the catalyst for development. So hereafter, this DPT program, direct benefit transfer program, is going to take place through this through this India Posts. So India Posts are expected to play a very important role in terms of collection of funds, in terms of dissemination of information. So these things are going to be very, very important. I'll just mention a few points during the initial remarks so that experts would have more time. As far as the MSME sector is concerned, we have been now getting phone calls from different MSME clusters during the last 2-3 days, thanking the government because one important reason for the problems of the MSME sector is inadequate funds. So even though Modi government has been taking sincere steps over the last few years to provide as much funds as possible. So under the credit guarantee scheme from this year, this is going to be expanded and loans should be given up to 10 crore. So from 5 crore, it is going to be increased to 10 crores. So this MSME sector is very happy because they will get collateral free loans up to 10 crores from this year onwards. In this uh, case, we have to remember that as far as startups are concerned, the startups would be getting 20 crores. So from 10 crore, their limit would be expanded to 20 crores. As far as the micro enterprises are concerned, we all know if we take the MSME sector, there are about nearly 60 million MSME enterprises in India, out of which more than 96%, 97% are micro enterprises. So micro enterprises have their own peculiar needs. So this budget has announced that micro enterprises would be getting rupees 10 lakh loans through credit cards. So these are some of the very important initiatives for the MSME sector. And we can see that in this budget, employment generation and entrepreneurship are given importance. 4 important areas are suggested for the overall development of the economy. They are poorer segments, women, youth, and the farmers. So this is the framework through which this budget is based. All of us know, as far as the ordinary sections are concerned, they have to be given as much benefit as possible so that they all can grow. This has been the mantra of Modi ji's government throughout the last 10, 11 years. Here again, now new initiatives have been announced and the existing schemes have been modified and then expanded. There are some new schemes also. For example, women empowerment through entrepreneur scheme. A new scheme has been announced. So it's going to offer financial and infrastructural support. So low interest loans are going to be given to women up to rupees 10 lakhs. Then they are going to be given skill development programs and they will be connected with others. So a dedicated network is going to be created. And in this budget, another new innovative scheme is that remote area startup promotion scheme. We all know that startup scheme was promoted a few years back, and it is benefiting the very ordinary people of this country, particularly women and SC/ST segment. Now, under this scheme, in the remotest areas, fostering entrepreneurship is given emphasis, for which they have announced tax exemption for 5 years, government guarantee for setting up infrastructure and all. So this is another new initiative, and another mm, important initiative of the government is social security for the gig workers. We all see these gig workers everywhere. They don't have security. But here, this budget has announced that an insurance cover would be given to them up to 5 lakhs. Then access to retirement saving schemes. They can register their names in e-Shram portal, which is exclusively allotted for this non-corporate sector, unorganized sector workers, so they can get benefit, through which they can get legal benefit framework to ensure fair working conditions also. So these are all some of the very important schemes announced for the ordinary poorer segments of the society. They are all going to be very, very important for the development of economy. We all know India is emerging as a global power. And if you take PPP terms, we are the third largest economy. We are the fastest growing economy among the larger countries. Last year, according to the latest estimate, growth rate was 6.4%. 25, 26, it is expected that our growth rate would be anywhere between 6.3 and 6.3 and 6.8%. So we remain as one of the perhaps the topmost fastest growing nation. So we are going towards the goal of vision of Viksit Bharat. To attain that vision, necessary steps are required. So Prime Minister has announced several schemes for it, and there are very, very certain innovative schemes like preservation of our cultural heritage, inscriptions, for which new scheme has been announced. So up to 1 crore, more than 1 crore number of inscriptions are going to be documented, preserved, for which a special depository is going to be set up, depository for IKS, which can be shared by all of us. So this is another new scheme. Then Bharatiya Bhasha scheme, through which the government is planning to digitalize texts, books in national languages, Indian languages. This is another initiative. And there are certain infrastructural schemes exclusively for the villages. One is the broadband connection to all the rural government schools. Of course, there are government schools in urban areas also, government schools, and then primary health centers. So this is going to be very, very important. Then 50,000 tinkering labs, Atal tinkering labs in government schools. We have seen in the last 6, 7 years that these laboratories, Atal tinkering laboratories, are creating a lot of interest, awareness among those students studying in government schools. I myself have visited certain schools in very poorer districts, and they are doing very good work. Many students from poorer backgrounds, rural backgrounds, they are all coming and showing their innovative abilities through exhibitions and all. So this budget is going to be very, very important. It continues with the previous budget, but this budget, as Mr. Jagannathan mentioned, is historic, because for the salaried segments and middle class groups, 12 lakhs tax exemption is a very great thing. We never expected. From 7 crore to 12 lakhs, a whopping 5 lakh rupees benefit is given by the government. For the senior citizens also, there are very many benefits by the government. So this budget is expected to propel our economy towards the vision of Viksit Bharat. So with these initial remarks, I'll request Sri Banshali to share his experiences on the budget. Mr. Bansali, please.
Sure. Thank you so much
Yes.
for inviting us, Trilok and me, both to this eminent meeting to discuss the union budget and its impact, especially related to the tax cuts which were announced by like the union minister while presenting the budget as the last sentence in her budget speech, which was, I think, the best sentence in the whole speech, I think, which created big uproar.
Yes.
Yeah. So what we will do is we have created some slides, and I'll get my colleague Trilok to share those slides and speak about them. I'll just give a summary of what we believe from this budget, and then I'll get Trilok to speak more in detail in terms of uh, this budget and its impact. So essentially, in our view, the context is such that over the last 10 odd years, during Mr. Modi's government, I think a large, it can be separated into few parts. So the first part was about cleaning the whole system in terms of getting the finances of the government in order, in terms of doing some structural reforms, be it RERA, be it GST rollout, and many other such, be it Insolvency Act. I think so that whole period of the first 5 years plus was more on cleansing and getting the structure in place. And after that, I think the government got into more reforms, whether opening up of sectors to for foreign investment to make it more liberalized and make things more competitive for the benefit of common man in this country, as well as I would say encouraging businessmen, both Indian as well as global, to invest into the industry by offering super low rates of even 15% for new manufacturing units. And I think that was a big masterstroke at that point of time, which I would say has encouraged many more businessmen to invest into manufacturing facilities in India. And one of the big creating opportunities will be created by manufacturing across the country. Remember, right now, manufacturing is a low part of our GDP. A large part is more service oriented, and a large part of services which we export in India are on the IT services side, which has done really well over the last 25 years, but they have created few centers within the country. It started in Bangalore and I think gradually moved into many more cities. As we speak today, there are about 10, 15 cities which will have almost 95% or probably more than that of the jobs in that sector. So these are some large cities which have got created and opportunity which have got created, but they are very concentrated. What it does is that people study across the country and then shift to these mega centers. And they not only, I would say, compact that whole city in terms of, because the city's land is limited, but there is big pressure on those cities. And beyond the point, the circulation doesn't happen in those cities in the economy. And thereby, I think what manufacturing does is that across the country, in every nook and corner of the country, you can create manufacturing facilities and create jobs for people within that geography. So that leads to people staying within the geography from where they belong to, rather than going out of their, not even probably city, but even states, to a few such cities. And while I talked about 10, 15, I think the top 5 cities themselves will have about 80% plus of those jobs. So there's a big pressure, and that leads to, I would say, a bit of social imbalance of people going out of one location and moving to a concentrated place. So manufacturing jobs is the need of the hour, which the government realized, and I think they've been coming out with various schemes. And the first one was bringing the tax rates down for new manufacturing unit. Now, all this has been done, and the economy has been, I think, doing quite well. And gradually, the organized side of the economy has been developing quite well over the last few years. We also had COVID in between, which I think paralyzed global economy as well as Indian economy, and it had an impact for almost 2 to 3 years. and probably we lost 1 or 2 years because of COVID, because it took us back 2 or 3 steps at least. But we successfully came out of that thanks to, I would say, government's way of working, where they didn't infuse that much money into the economy like many other governments globally did, which led to very high inflation across the globe. And the ripple effects of that were felt even in India, that we had a sort of high inflationary regime after coming to almost below 5% inflation for a couple of years before COVID. So we went again to 7-8% inflation, and then probably now it is again into control. But thanks to government's disciplined fiscal policies, we didn't enter a very high inflationary territory compared to many other geographies. In US, inflation used to be 1 or 2%. People were very used to not paying uh, an increased price for every good which they purchased. While in India, we were used to have a price increase of almost 3-5% at least every year on every commodity. So thankfully, we didn't get thatted by those similar increases, but the global population did get, I would say, very disturbed. So thank the government, I think, did a brilliant job there. The next in line, I think, again, as we were seeing, and Trilok will take with more data to you in terms of that the shift from unorganized to organized was somewhere slowing down over the last 1.5, 2 years. And I think government picked it up. And one of the important reasons behind this tax cut is to give more money in the hand of middle class India and this is all tax cuts, so it's all going to be an organized spend rather than an unorganized spend. And given that it's a large amount and not just 5-10,000 rupees per customer or per taxpayer, it is more like 50,000 to 1 lakh per salaried individual, most of them, or probably MSME individuals. So because they are not paying taxes, it's all organized side of the economy, and that should lead to a big boost in the domestic consumption, which has been, I would say, sort of slowing down, especially in parts of the country. And Trilok will allude more along with data to showcase that. Alongside that, I think somewhere people believe that government's focus has moved from capex to only do consumption. Our view is that's not the case. The focus definitely has come into play for consumption by bringing the tax rates down and giving the tax breaks to the common man. But the focus of government on capex, I think, has not gone away. I think we had taken a path from almost less than 2% of GDP spent on capital expenditure to go to as high as 4% plus. If you combine both the central capex as well as the schemes which they give to states, so the implied capex, as we call it, built together has moved from 1.8% to almost 4% plus now. So it's almost a 2%, 2 times jump as a percentage of GDP, which in itself is big. And I think we are in that range for now, almost 2 to 3 years. And that, I think, is a big base in itself. So the government focus is, I would say, not shifting, but now in addition to capex, they are also trying to use the consumption side of the economy to not just have the supply side, but also the demand side, so that the country grows and there is a wider circulation of money in the system. So that's the context, I think, with which the government has taken this brave call of bringing the taxes down, giving more flexibility to middle class Indian to spend more, to save more. And that, I would say, will create a big impact on the economy. We were going down to almost 6.5% GDP growth forecast. And probably this should take it to 7% plus. Whether it will happen in this year itself or probably sometime next year, only time will tell. But I think I think the economy will start growing much faster than what people were expecting till about a month back. With that, I would invite my colleague Trilok, who is a very accomplished fund manager and reads the macro very well. He has been into fund management industry for over 18 years. He's been with us for more than 2 years. And he has a very good, I would say, knowledge of how the economy works and what the impact of these tax cuts as well as the capex of government will be on the economy, I'll invite Trilok to present to all of us.
Sure. Thanks, Sushant. Thanks for the brief introduction, and thanks for the opportunity for sharing our perspective on the implication of the budget and how are we reading it. I would like to first, before we start, I'll just try and present us a deck which let us me know if it's visible. I hope this is visible to everybody.
Yes, yes.
Sure. So, I this is obviously one of the most important agenda for the budget if you think through. Over the last 4 to 5 years, if you look at the broader key epicenter of the budget, it was capex. I think this time around budget has clearly given the the open mandate to obviously drive consumption. Now, there is in India, the per capita income of the country is around to 26, $2,700, give or take, $100 here and there, depending on what currency do you sort of, measure the amount with, and the income, that obviously essentially has no tax as we speak now is, around $12,500. So typically the ratio is between 1:5. When you compare the similar sort of ratio to global countries, this is obviously one of the best ratio that you can think about per capita income to tax implications if you are obviously earning in a country like India. In US, the number is broadly ratio 1:1.7, and most other emerging markets the number could be 1 to 2, and India is in 1:5. So what I'm trying to put a perspective is a broader population of the country, significant population of the country will be obviously beneficiary of this particular of this endeavor the government has taken. We have tried to put across the benefit that each of the taxpayer will get because of the changes in the tax slabs the government has done, and more importantly, what will be the real nominal impact of the growth rate as well real growth rate in each income bracket that you can see. So what we are seeing is between 14 to 18% is a benefit in the hands of taxpayers, and between 9 and 12% in real growth rates terms. So this is obviously a big boost. If you had seen this data for the last 5 years, to my mind and understanding, the real growth will be in the range of between a CAGR of 6 to 7%, and this suddenly a growth of 12 13% is a big boost in the hands of consumers. This is the most first and most important point I want to share. We want to dive a little deeper on how, what kind of food, spending does a urban discretionary consumer or a rural, consumer does. So if you look at, necessary, and this is obviously a data as per the price, this is an independent agency that, does a broad basketing of how do you spend your income on. So, essentials, which is basically primarily grocery for our business, for our, housing needs, it's typically a third of the income that is spent by an average consumer. Housing is obviously another subsequent data, and healthcare, health and education is the four large most important point. But if you look at discretionary items, right, which is eating out, spending non important sort of food items, travels and apparels are the are the largest component of this discretionary expenditure. To my mind, when you look at the income levels, which is 2.5 million and above in a year, electronics, travel and tourism, automobiles, jewelry will be the biggest beneficiary of this category. So, the overall income that obviously has the benefit of this will obviously be in the hands of consumer, but B, the multiplier effect, to my understanding and what our reading so far, has been between 2.5 to 3 times multiplier. So what we're seeing is across categories, whether it's electronics, it's travel and tourism, it's automobiles, whether it's about like larger consumer durable companies or food aggregators, as basic as as basic as the gig economy workers, as Mr. As we all rightly pointed out, that it is government has taken a larger inclusion agenda of even ensuring that the last mile delivery person also comes into the overall benefit of insurance, and B, this is indirectly boosting the amount, boosting the kind of growth rates and the essential demand for these particular segments. For us, very, very critical to understand is not only the driver of the discretionary items will be a big beneficiary for the market, for the economy, but importantly, what we have seen and observed is typical discretionary expenditure has a higher multiplier effect compared to essential commodities or essential foods in the last many, many years. So we think this is obviously a great sort of move done by the government of India, and and the actual amount of revenue foregone of 1 lakh crore would essentially have a very, very large implications on the GDP as well as the total contribution to the business. As Sushant sir was highlighting, GST collection or indirect collection has been the big one of the biggest reforms for the government of the last few years. And since the time GST was introduced in 2017 till 2024, the GST obviously growth rates were obviously robust because of the new tax in the system and everything gets subsumed into it. Also, the number of GST tax filers in terms of in quantum had grown at a healthy 12 to 14% compounding over the last 5 6 years. So what we are trying to say is more and more businesses, more and more companies, more and more corporations, partnerships were actually coming into organized economy, which is why the growth rate, except COVID, was very robust, growing at high teens in the last many years. However, in the last few months, we had seen that growth rate tapering off. In certain months, it also came down to as low as 6%. Essentially, the growth rate obviously is within in a low single digit number, a low double digit and high single digit number, which is obviously a sign of either the shift of unorganized to organized getting slowed down, or it is also an indication or implication what is the larger economic slowdown that the market is looking at. So we think by this particular this particular single agenda of driving the boost and the consumption economy, this will not only propel the demand required by in the hands of consumers by giving more money, it will also help to further fuel the growth momentum of unorganized to organized, because as more and more GST, as more and more tax, people come into the ambit of paying taxation either direct or indirect, you will see more and more consumption and capex picking up in the future, particularly private sector capex. Capex is obviously one of the very, very important agenda that the government had seen. If you look at the broader, number, so between 16 and 20, if you look at the number, it was only 7% sort of CAGR. But 2024, just after the COVID, government propelled significant, thrust on the capex, and we obviously saw one of the largest increase in the capex in the last 5 years, of 3 trillion to 10 trillion in a matter of 4 years time frame. Although the next 3 years, if you look at the growth rates, looks very reasonable in terms of 8.5%. But we should not forget, as a percentage of GDP, capex is still at 4 to 4.2 percentage points, which is significantly ahead in the last even in the preceding sort of era. More importantly, the capex that usually have been also in FY24 and 25, the government had actually allocated versus the spend was obviously relatively lesser, because a 24 was a function of the whole overall elections, and 25 obviously was a 9 month budget. So what we are trying to say is, although optically the overall capex spends look at 10% growth for next year, but the actual versus budgeted deficit could effectively means the actual growth could be significantly higher for the next year. And we think this is very, very important to larger point that most people are missing out. Also, when you look at road, railways, defense, and defense obviously is one of the very, very critical, I think so, driver for most economies and the and the countries globally, given the geopolitical tensions arising. Defense has actually seen a 14% jump in this allocation this year, which is again a great sort of great move towards making India as an Atmanirbhar Bharat compared to what India obviously reliance on imports have been. So we think capex is actually lower versus the trend line, but actual spending is a key monitorable that one should focus on FY26. And we will, as an economy, would actually be well ahead of the last 4 5 years of of actual allocations when you see compared to the historical data that 26 could present for us. This is again very, very critical to my mind, in the interest of the economy. Divestments and RBI proceeds is absolutely it should be spot on for us to meet the, fiscal deficit target. So you think, in the divestment budgeted estimates, we have seen, barring 29 and 2018, we have made, or exceeded the budget targets. Last 2, 3 years, the budgeted target for disinvestments have been quite lower. And to our understanding, it could well be a choice that the government obviously took, of not utilizing the assets, to at the right time. Maybe they will obviously focus to sell it when they intend to. But we think, divestment of 47,000 crore in FY 27 26 is not a very, very tall ask, subject to obviously the intent is very clear to monetize the assets that they have, whether it's about privatization of certain companies or in trying to just additional sell some stake in the additional businesses, which is through ETFs. Second and most important, I would say, important element in the overall fiscal maths will be the income from the dividend and profits. So RBI, obviously has played a fantastic role last year, and even giving by 1 lakh crore of dividend, and I think so in FY 25 also a significant amount of amount of money is supposed to be coming from RBI, either through in terms of a dividend or in terms of other forex gains and so on and so forth. Within 26, they have also budgeted a reasonably sharp estimation on a YY basis, which will be very, very critical on how the fiscal deficit will be panning out in FY 26. We think so. Disbursements and income from dividends will be the key monitorable as we move forward. This is obviously just a brief summary of what's happened over the last many years. What do you see in common even prior to COVID? Because COVID was a year which obviously the world took a shock of. And when you go back to the history, India was the only economy in the world which did not resort to giving freebies and incentives to drive economy in the subsequent year. I still remember in calendar year 20 or FY 21, US central banker actually gave $600 per week per family in the hands of consumer just to go and splurge and and spend in the economy to drive economy. India was the only exception in the world, obviously not giving money in the hands of income taxpayers or the or the average person. In fact, India chose to take a different route by giving a significant amount of food to the common man. I still know around India is the largest distributor of food grains to the common man of around nearly 80 crore 80 crore people of the country enjoy that particular benefit as we speak 2026. But what we're trying to allude here is, despite the challenges, in except for COVID 2021, fiscal deficit or the deficit that, the expenditure is greater than revenues has been consistently on a slowing down path from 9.2% to 4.4%. It's nearly half over the last 5 years. And we think the commitment of the government remains to obviously take it even further down as we move forward. In fact, to the extent that if you look at government has articulated it absolutely clearly that we will, have a debt to GDP at below 50% by FY 30. Now we obviously did our own calculations on various scenarios, assuming nominal GDP growth rate at 10%, 11%, and 10.5%. In only scenario of 10% nominal GDP growth, where 6% is typically the real growth, and 4% is a common denominator that we assume for inflation. We think the targeted debt to GDP to fall below 50% should not be a very, very tall ask unless there is a global sort of unless there is a global disruption or a second or a global financial crisis that we saw in FY 08. So our sense and my understanding is our debt to GDP will obviously continue to dwindle downwards. That's also reflected on the gross borrowing. So if you look at the gross borrowing as a percent of GDP, has also been stagnant over the last 3, 4 years. And to my mind, this is obviously a great sign on two aspects. A, India's overall rating that the global credit agencies look at, which is S&P or Moody's and so on and so forth, will obviously ensure that India's rating gets an upgrade, and at least the outlook being positive. More importantly, our ability of the government to obviously put the expenditure at the right place, which is capital expenditure, and trying to pump up the business rather than only focusing on revenue expenditure, which is largely a function of subsidies, interest and pension payouts, will be a significant change over the next few years, given the fact that India remains the fastest growing economy in the world. I think with that, I had to with that I obviously comment my overall presentation that I wanted to share. Three most important point I were to summarize: A, consumption big boost by this budget, which means 0.5 to 0.75% of incremental GDP. B, the capex allocation of 9-10% is broadly misread. There is a lot of capex that has been not spent, which is budgeted in the last 5 years, which will obviously ensure that next year will be a very very critical component. And C, disinvestments and proceeds from RBI will be the key sort of key most important monitorable in FY26 to meet the fiscal deficit of 4.4%. I think so. With what the our 10-year government GSEC bonds have been reflected, we think the market has given a thumbs up to the kind of expectations that the fiscal deficit will be met, and our 10-year GSEC has actually cooled off by 12 basis points since the budget is announced, which means there is a significant belief on these numbers. And unless there is a global financial sort of challenges or massive slowdown in the global economy, India should stand as a shining star for the next year and the subsequent years to come by. Thanks for the time, and I obviously would like to hand it over back to Sushant for his comments.
No, thanks, Trilok. Probably, is there another speaker session which otherwise we can get into questions if there are any?
Yes, thank you, Trilokji and Bansaliji, for giving a very, very concise and very valuable inputs of how budget 2025 impacts and helps in overall improvement. Professor Sir, can we have Surabhi Hodigiri to...
Yeah, please.
Yes.
Namaste, everybody. Thank you so much to the SPA MRF for inviting me for this conversation, and really, really good to hear from Professor, from Sushantji, as well as Trilokji on the various aspects of the budget that they found outstanding. A significant number of the technical points that I think we've all been uploading for the last 1 week have been covered, from the taxation benefits that have been received to different conversations on capex, investments, opening up of different sectors. The way I want to approach the next 15 minutes is to share 5 big ideas that I felt were big takeaways for this budget. And having said that, I want to ground it in one policy making 101, which is we've all seen in the last couple of months that there was a very visible brewing discontent amongst a certain section of society, where the feeling was that there was high taxation, both indirect as well as direct, and some relief, some catering to higher consumption for this segment was required. And what we saw happen was, one of the best cases of participatory democracy, of representative democracy, where that concern was conveyed through different mediums, whether it was social media, whether it was focus group gatherings that the finance minister attended, or through different ways in which a policymaker gets to know what the pulse of the people is. And somewhere, I think many industry experts as well as policy experts knew that this was coming, this tax benefit or this increase of STAB was coming. But it was a fantastic example that we saw live play out of responsive governance. And for that, I commend the Prime Minister as well as the Finance Minister, of course, for having put the ear to the ground and given that tax relief to the middle class. Having said that, I want to speak beyond the tax, beyond direct taxes. I want to talk about a few sectors that I found very interesting, a few policy announcements that the budget focused on. The first one, of course, on the four drivers, the special focus on agriculture. We have spoken about agriculture, um, reinventing agriculture in many, many different ways since the Prime Minister took office in 2014. And there have been many ideas that have allowed for agriculture not just to be, just another sector, but a sector that is incredibly crucial in contributing to India's growth, not one that lags us behind. But what I found really interesting in this budget was the innovative focus on going from this sector as a sector of survival, of one that a significant percent of the population is dependent on, going from it being a survival sector to one that could be a leader sector, one that gives us economic leadership. And I say this with also the economic survey in mind. When we had the chief economics advisor speak about the progress in agriculture, this time he focused on how the allied sectors, the agriculture allied sectors, used innovative methods to increase their own productivity. And that could be something that we could also see in the core agri sectors. And I saw that was further worked upon in the budget in itself, whether it is the Dhan Dhanya Krishi Yojana, where 100 low productivity districts are going to be turned into agricultural powerhouses, or the fact that we've had, Nikhil Kamath, of course, everybody's been saying his idea of a makhana, a big industry in makhana has been given approval, but it's an innovative idea. Let's talk about what innovation comes in our agricultural sector, our agricultural uses, and make it into a world-class sort of facility or world-class product. So having that sort of a investment in the makhana board, the focus on cotton productivity through the mission as well as seed mission, each of these things, I think, to me, signal us going from that traditional thought process or undoing a very difficult thought process which we have had, which is that we have a significant population that is dependent on agriculture, and any growing economy or any developed economy requires for that agricultural sector to have lesser number of people, the manufacturing sector to be bigger, therefore more productive, because the growth is higher in the manufacturing sector, and then of course the services sector to add on to higher end exports, higher end technology production. But let's not look at agriculture as something that we need to drag with us in order for in order for the country's progress, or that this is seen in any way as a look, here is a low productivity sector. We've all heard of the very discriminatory Hindu growth rate, which used to be based on to a great extent on the agri farm sector. But the rethinking of this, not just in this budget, but through years of the Modi government, rethinking of agriculture also as a leader, to me, I think was solidified in this budget. Having said that, the next one, which was a big, or rather what I felt was necessary to be said again and again and to be acknowledged by the government, and to also have what stands apart for me from the Prime Minister's vision, his government's vision, his government's working, is that we do not brush aside, no economic policy can be made by brushing aside reality. That was the approach that we had through the pandemic, when we discussed not to over invest or to give that beneficiary amounts that, say, the US provided or Germany gave. We decided we're going to be prudent about our fiscal spending at a difficult time and ensure and not spur consumption the way the developed countries did. But that was also rooted in a very realistic understanding of where our country was. Similarly, we have a median age of 28.5. There is a youth population that is burgeoning. There is a youth population that is really looking forward to contributing to this, this Viksit Bharat phase. And that youth population requires both skills as well as the places where skills can be used. So the entrepreneurial mindset, the skill development workshops, as well as employment opportunities, each of these things were realistically aspects that the government had to put their weight behind, and significantly so for all the budgets. The 100,000 crore, 10,000 crore fund of funds that have been invested in deep tech, in AI. The fear that we have about new innovation and deep tech innovation is that they will take away jobs. But if there is any government or any future-looking government that can implement AI as a medium for human progress at scale. That is, I think that's the government of India, through various small ways in which we can train our people to adapt to AI and therefore become more productive. So I think that's what the fund of funds in terms of what they're trying to do is going to spur and going to allow for. Having said that, there is also this absolute necessity to ensure that each of these investments are giving us that benefit and that return, and I think that's a conversation that we saw acknowledged in the budget. Hence a specific focus on targeted groups, ensuring that they are given the right support was also included. Sir Sushant sir as well as Trilok spoke very deeply about infrastructure and investment. I don't want to repeat similar points, but I just had one thing to say in terms of the conversation on infrastructure and a larger investment conversations, which was the rural urban migration rate has also been increasing, and we saw that as a theme as well with the 1 lakh crore urban challenge that was announced by the finance minister. We have been talking about making our cities more better equipped in terms of infrastructure, better equipped in terms of livability, and the investment has been flowing also from that perspective. The fact that there is now a urban challenge fund where cities are competing in competitive federalism in play, I think is a really, really good step. Having said that, I want to remind myself of something that for the former RBI governor had said, Subbarao, when he was speaking on a TV channel, that this fiscal prudence and this investment in cities, or the fiscal investments that have been happening in cities through the government of India, through Smart Cities program, through competitive ways, through Niti Aayog, each of these also have to have some sort of ways in which task forces or infrastructure funds, something that have been very successful in particular states, that monitor and ensure that these are done on time. As we go towards more urban population, the livability of cities come into question. And I'm very appreciative that the government has taken this in the form of a challenge fund. Having said that, another program that I think was incredibly encouraging to see go the next step was the new airports that were announced, or the new airports target that was announced under UDAN. We have redefined what regional connectivity has meant. Today, I can take a flight to Kalburgi, which would have never happened, say, about 15 years ago, and that has spurred for so much more conversations on growth in these cities that were tier 2, tier 3. And the fact that we're going to have 120 more, or that is the vision of the government, is very encouraging, and it's incredibly important to see that this will further the growth as a growth multiplier in various regions that have previously been underdeveloped. So that would be another big announcement that I was keenly looking at. We've always had we've always had ingenious ideas that have come out of the Prime Minister's government, and one of them, this is also my specialization, and I'm very happy to sort of note the ideas that have come from this government have really enabled for digital public infrastructure in this country to become a force multiplier for growth, for accessibility, for inclusion. One of the things that really stood out in this budget was the use of post offices as logistics hub. I would like to connect that to the ONDC project, which is India's own DPI for e-commerce. And I think it would be a great way for us to further our e-commerce infrastructure and ensure that we have connectivity, not just in the big cities, and 10-minute deliveries, not just in the cities, but across the country. So that's another thing that I'm really, really excited about. I promised 6 points, but I will try to end at 5, because I'm not sure if I'm taking up too much time. Bunch of different human-centric growth oriented stuff in terms of investing in Atal Tinkering Labs that Professor spoke about, expansion of IITs or the AI centers or the medical seats that have been announced. Sometimes when we're looking at, I think different people industry looks at the budget in a particular way, politicians look at the budget in a particular way, policymakers look at it in a particular way. But finally, the hard numbers that people find, common people look at as how does this affect my life? And I think it's a great thing to look at the number of IITs or IIMs that have been announced, the fact that new medical seats have been announced. We really have that need in terms of more doctors per population. We also require more aggressive treatment centers that are locally available, and people don't have to travel to particular parts of the state or the country for treatment. And cancer care centers is something that has been announced in this budget. And finally, one of the things that I think, as an urban dweller, looking at the way the gig economy has been growing, the first sort of formal recognition of the gig workers and their role in India's growth has come from the government in a significant way. And in adding on to that, social security for gig workers is another big thing that we've all been looking at. Having said all of this, I think I just want to end with the fact that this was also a historic budget for another reason that I would be looking at, which is the fact that the first full-time finance minister of our country, a woman, first woman finance minister full-time of the country, delivered her 8th budget, which is a moment of incredible pride. And it motivates so many young women like myself to think more about policy. So and she has been getting so much criticism, and to see her also being celebrated by her members of parliament, to be seen celebrated by her prime minister, was an incredibly beautiful moment. So having said that, I really enjoyed watching her present the budget and the last part, and then the conversation after, of course. Here's hoping that we build on that, and all the policies as well as the frameworks that come after are also just as in line. So having said that, thank you so much, and namaste, and thank you to the foundation for having me today.
Very good. Very good. Very clear.
Thank you so much, Surabhi ji, for highlighting the path-breaking efforts taken by the Honorable Finance Minister in this budget. Over to Professor Sir. Welcome Anirban Sir also to the meeting. Vanakkam.
I invite Dr. Anirban Gargudi to make his views.
Thank you so much. I'm a non-specialist here, but I just wanted to ask if Surabhi is still there, whether she has made her 6th point, because we are not in a hurry. I think the way you have, I'm really happy that I could listen to you. I was caught up in another organizational meeting, so it took a little time. But I think you have, and I'm very happy that we have recorded the entire talk of yours,
Yes.
the entire analysis of yours, and indeed, you have actually analyzed the budget as a policy expert, and you have described it in a manner in which lay people like us who do not have a background of economics and finance, and for whom budget analysis is always a challenge. You have really made these points, and I'm happy that it has been done in this way so that we can, in fact, make a transcript of this and also circulate it amongst a larger section, and in fact also get it translated. But I just wanted to, with Professor's permission, if you have not made your 6th point, please do it, because that is important. We are educating ourselves so that these things are amplified. This is amplified. Yes, please.
It was, thank you so much for the kind words, Anirbanji, but I must say, I learned a lot from Sushant and Trilok's presentation. I found their words very astute and their observations very astute, especially the capex. They spoke about how increasing consumption doesn't necessarily mean we have reduced capex investment, which I had not, I had not seen the numbers. So I felt that was also good. Surely you can go back to their words too, and I'd love for them to intervene. But the 6th point was just that, financial reforms, which they had spoken about very significantly. We have now FDI in insurance 100%. And the focus on making ease of doing business as not just metrics, but also investing in ensuring ease of doing business is done. That I think was another significant step. We've been talking about process reforms. Sanjeev Sanyal especially has been talking about process reforms for the last couple of years, maybe 2-3 years. And Finance Minister was able to again invest in taking out redundant laws, making redundant regulations around businesses, doing away with it. So that I think was the sort of sixth point that I had. But I'm over to also Sushant and Trilokji if they have anything to add on this space.
Thank you. I was just wanting to make this point that for the last nearly 1.5 years, I'm sure others have been also doing it, but at the SPMRF, we have been particularly speaking about and highlighting the issue of gig workers. So in fact, we were all very delighted when, in fact, the representation that we had made to the consultation, during the consultation that took place with the finance minister, this was one major point that we had flagged. And I'm not able to see the others actually. ये पूरा screen हो गया, मैं दूसरे को देख नहीं पा रहा. And so I think this was a major step, and as you very rightly highlighted it. I just ये पूरा हाँ सबको देख नहीं पा रहा. And I just wanted to make this point that especially in fact, today we were discussing the Bharat Gyan Kosh, the entire approach to documenting and making available online Indian manuscripts. This was also something very important, a very crucial milestone, a watershed, when we are talking about the rise of civilization in India. Because you cannot rise, you cannot get back your civilizational consciousness until and unless your records, your documents, your manuscripts are preserved and disseminated in the backdrop of today. Most civilizations have disappeared when they lost consciousness of their greatness. And I think these manuscripts, the manuscript mission was there once upon a time. This is a leap, in fact, on the manuscript mission. And I think in course of time, if this really goes ahead systematically, a large number of scholars will be able to access the huge repository of manuscripts that are there in India. And I think this is a real tribute to scholars like, I was just thinking, scholars like Rahul Sankirtan, who spent an entire lifetime going around India, going around India's neighborhood, going around the world, collecting Indian manuscripts which were taken away from us. So on the one hand, while we see our gods coming back home, we also see a major step in preserving and digitizing the manuscripts of India. This was one thing. The other was online availability of books in all languages for scholars to access. So when we are talking about democratization, equity, social justice in the field of education. This is a major step. Not only that, in a country as diverse as India, for example, I wish others could also, but like I can speak Tamil and we converse in Tamil at times. But that's because I grew up in the South, I had that advantage. But this obviously has a different conditioning. When you can do that, you like to speak that language. You enjoy that language. Now, can we go a step ahead and also read classics in each other's languages? So this is also a major step, translation and then putting online, making available for research, for students, for scholars, these books. The other point I wanted to make, because my field is very limited, I focus primarily on culture and education. The announcing of 50 tourist destinations that have taken place, of developing special religious spots, special religious centers in a bigger way so that more people can come. I mean, there has been some point some people have made, we are touristification of our religious and pilgrimage centers. That is one way of looking at it. But if you want more people to come, if you really want everyone to savor, to experience, to feel, to absorb, to imbibe, the various religious centers, the various dharmic centers all across the country, then you would have to enable them to come there. And therefore, you need that kind of infrastructure. You need that kind of setup. So it benefits the state because this scheme is going to partner with states. And I hope all states take advantage of this scheme, including West Bengal, which is not out of India, which is part of India. I hope all states take benefit of this because this is going to immensely develop the infrastructure, the pilgrimage infrastructure in this country. And if you have read the travelogues of various eminent writers, you would see the challenges that they would face while going on a pilgrimage. Yes, it's true. Spiritually and mystically, the more challenges on a pilgrimage, you can perhaps focus also more, on the process of pilgrimage. That is there. But in today's age, you have to have certain amenities. You have to have a certain speed. You have to have a certain structure, superstructure, which can enable the pilgrim to go. And if you recall, on the first, when he inaugurated the Kashi Vishwanath corridor, Prime Minister had also mentioned that the focus is so that the ordinary pilgrim can come and can completely absorb this entire, the ambience, the atmosphere of this place. So I think after many decades, there is a refocus on the pilgrim circuit. I don't see this kind of focus happening ever after independence in the last 70 years. There will naturally be challenges. These challenges will be addressed, but that this focus, that we are a unique nation, we are a nation as K.V. Ramaswamy Iyengar, Radha Kumud Mukherjee, Fundamental Unity of India, had written 100 years ago. In 1914, it was the first time that the Fundamental Unity of India was brought out. That this nation has been created, this nation has been delineated, imagined through the footfalls of pilgrims. If that is so, there has to also be a greater dissemination of the possibility of many more people undertaking pilgrimages during their lifetime. So this is an interesting proposition, and especially also the proposition of developing further focus on developing a circuit or a entire network based on Lord Buddha's life and times. This is also very important. And many of us, a number of other scholars have written on the temple economy in India, the way it is thriving, the way it is very unique to our socio economic system. So this temple economy of India. So naturally, there's this entire ecosystem which will develop further and which will develop throughout the year. There was the other day we were having a detailed discussion, and this came up that earlier, for example, a place like Puri, Lord Jagannath's abode. Earlier, the crowd used to be only limited to a certain period of the year, but now it is throughout. Because of the connectivity, the possibilities. I was on a Vande Bharat train on 26 January. I made it a point to be on a Vande Bharat train in the morning on 26 January, which was going from Howrah to Puri. Amazing experience. And the way people just boarded in Howrah and they were absolutely taken care of, and then they landed in Puri with all the facilities available. I think this was something which was unimaginable, and at such a reasonable rate and so comfortably the journey undertaken. So I think we are also seeing a Gen Next leap, at least an incremental, even if you don't want to call it a leap, at least an incremental, gradual, systematic, but constant movement forward in imagining the next level of this kind of, developing this such an ecosystem. So this is what, these are just some thoughts that I wanted to share. Viksit Bharat, just to end with this, that my part, I just wanted to. India, constantly speaking, Prime Minister is flagging the vision of a Viksit Bharat. So every budget henceforth since last year when he has been focusing on this, I think this should be the core and the essence of such an exercise. In the next 25 years, I say that all of us, many of us, we are probably of the same age. We remember exactly when Atalji was the Prime Minister and what he did, what were the revolutionary steps that he had undertaken, from Golden Quadrilateral to Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, to forming the Tribal Affairs Ministry, to the Donor Ministry, and so many other things. And it has been nearly 25 years that he has been Prime Minister. So 25 years is not a very long period of time in a nation's life or history. So we have 25 years when we celebrate 2047, 100 years of our independence. What kind of nation, what kind of mindset do we wish to display, to have, to possess, to exude And that is, I think, going to make all the difference. When we speak about, some make fun of Vishwaguru, the thought of Vishwaguru. Prime Minister says Vishwamitra. And there's a very wonderful concept in the Buddhist philosophy which says Kalyana Mitra, which is the same as Vishwamitra. You can't be a Kalyana Mitra without being Vishwamitra. They are interposed. And so therefore, this feeling, when he talks about 11 resolutions, when we celebrate 75 years of the Constitution, is 11 resolutions that we need to, we could look at. 5 Pancha Pran that he speaks about. I think it is the essence of that Viksit Bharat. A Viksit Bharat which is conscious, which is proud, which is feeling the revitalizing of its heritage, of its inheritance, of its civilizational perspective. And on the other hand, which is at ease with handling AI, with handling technology, with taking up greater technological challenges and mastering those. This is how I look at it. And I think this is a very interesting exercise, Professor.
Yes.
That this happened, you have such eminent people speaking on this panel.
Yes.
Each one, I believe, have really made a point, and I really wish that this is, since it is recorded, all these interventions really are disseminated widely
Yes.
through the SPMRF platform. And we would really also like to come over to you someday. Come over to you there and also do various programs,
Yes.
undertake various efforts also.
Yes.
This is an ongoing process. There is a continuous effort to see that India is disintegrated,
Yes.
that India is halted on her tracks,
Yes.
that the rise of India is stymied, that it is limited. So the constant effort to ensure that civilizational India rises in all her dimensions and aspects must also be a continuous process. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Jagan, we can request the participants to raise queries or share their views. If it-
Yes, sir. Thank you, Anirbanji. Participants who would like to ask questions are free to ask questions to the guests, speakers, please. Any questions you can ask the eminent speakers? By the time I have a small.
I think it is so comprehensive that I think there's not many questions. It has been, I think, it's
Yes, many have joined.
Very interesting, Anirbanji, because you spoke about, I know that's your passion area, and culture, tourism, civilizational revival, while connecting it to economic, upliftment. While Trilok and Sushant spoke so deeply about the markets, about industry and macro level trends, whereas I spoke like a policymaker. So we've covered significant ground in the conversation for sure.
indeed, I think it has been very comprehensive.
Absolutely.
It is from your.
Absolutely. I have a small 4-line quatrain, which is a 4-line poem, which summarizes on Viksit Bharat Prime Minister's vision.
Yes.
Which is work each day with heart and might, for nation's growth a shining light. Step by step, let progress rise. Together we soar, touching the skies. Viksit Bharat, Vande Mataram.
Wonderful. Very good.
Sri Banshali ji, you want to make any final comments?
Yeah, I think thank you so much for opportunity given to Trilok and me to participate at this distinguished gathering. And as we picked up that it's not just consumption, but it's consumption plus capex. And I think a combination of these two C's will have our GDP grow much faster and enable India to become a Viksit Bharat very soon, probably before 2047. And we wish that this continues. Ease of doing business is a big initiative which government has taken, and we as industry participant wish that it happens soon, and it happens with much more comprehensiveness and engagement with the industry. in terms of what the industry perceives as ease of doing business and not just what government perceives as ease of doing business. So we look forward to participate and engage with the government on that as well. With that, I would say thank you so much for having us here and participating in this.
Thank you, thank you.
I'm
Look
very
forward
happy
to
that
meet you
you
in person.
flagged, Surabhiji, you flagged specially that Nirmala ji is the first woman finance minister to present 8 consecutive budgets.
Yes.
I think this is both the first finance minister and the second finance minister, Shanmugam Chetty and John Mathai, both resigned. And John Mathai specially resigned on principles. That was because, Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee resigned in April 1950. Dr. John Mathai resigned in August 1950. And Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar resigned in 1951, I think August or September. So it was a strange beginning that you had 2 of members of the Constituent Assembly. One a member of the Constituent Assembly, one of the tallest leaders from West Bengal and in the opposition later on, and the other the framer of the Constitution leaving the cabinet. So therefore, I think this is unique, and it's again when Prime Minister talks about women-led development, I think this is a wonderful, inspiring symbol to have Nirmala ji presenting her 8th consecutive budget. Thank you for flagging that.
Jagan, Air Vice Marshal is there.
Yes, sir.
Yes, please.
Vijay Kumar sir is the retired Air Vice Marshal. Sir, you can ask any question, please. Thanks for joining, sir.
He's mute.
Mute. Jagan.
I think he has to be unmuted.
Do we have to do it here?
No, we have done it over.
Okay.
He is not able to unmute.
Vijay Kumar ji, I think you can unmute if you want to ask any question. Sir, I think we can have the closing remarks and wind up, I guess, because it's been a very wonderful, all-encompassing session with all verticals being covered wonderfully. Thanks to all of you. Sir, not audible, sir. Sir, not audible.
Yes, are we audible now? Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
All eminent panelists and experts, especially on behalf of Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee Research Foundation. And we hope to continue our association with you and to keep getting your feedback, your guidance and your direction and your active participation in our efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anything you could not speak. Air Vice Marshal.
Yes.
Now we will start.
Okay, you can unmute. ये कर सकते हैं। ये म्यूट था क्या अपने तरफ से?
नहीं सर, वो लोग नहीं कर पा रहे थे सर।
Air Vice Marshal.
ठीक है, अभी ये कर देंगे।